Hello, everyone. My name is Tyler Selhorn, and welcome to another episode of The Remote Show, where we discuss everything to do with remote work with the people who know it best. Thanks so much for listening. The Remote Show is brought to you by We Work Remotely, the largest community of remote workers in the world. With over 220,000 unique users per month, We Work Remotely is the most effective way to hire. Today, we are blessed to be learning out loud with Sheila Repeta. Equal parts strategy, empathy, and passion, Sheila loves pulling the people levers to make organizations thrive. With nearly 15 years as a committed people leader, she has worked on everything from transactional HR to people strategy across a myriad of industries, including tech, healthcare, auto, and public agencies. Having worked both in-house and consulting, Sheila has seen HR executed a multitude of ways and leverages that perspective to build progressive and practical HR solutions for the companies she works with. Her passion is ensuring the people practices are running on all cylinders throughout the entire talent cycle. She is passionate about helping organizations identify hotspots of cultural misalignment and bright spots between employee experience and business strategy to bring out the best in their business and their people. She has a knack for writing HR communications in the form of song spoofs. Hashtag sorry not sorry. When not working, you'll frequently find her accompanied by her wife and 3 sons, lost outdoors hiking, running, and gallivanting in nature, and ready to watch almost any sporting event. Sheila, it is a pleasure to invite you and the TeamSnap journey here to the Remote Show. Tell us, what's been your experience of running and working and leading the people team at TeamSnap?
Yeah, so I am currently the Senior Vice President of People here at TeamSnap. I've been here for about 4.5 years. So the fun part about TeamSnap is that I always tell people we were remote before COVID made it cool or forced us into it. So TeamSnap, we are the #1 youth sports management app with 25 million users. So by nature, we're trying to connect people remotely, right? Think about it. Coaches, players, teams that are trying to get to a place or execute a unified vision. We're doing the same thing inside and outside the walls. So we've been remote for about 12 years. I've been leading the people team and have actually built the people team here at TeamSnap in a remote environment entirely, pre-pandemic, and we've maintained that post-pandemic.
Really, really cool. Okay, so take us back to those early days, right?
Yeah.
You know, we're saying, okay, are we gonna get a lease, or are we gonna keep hiring remotely, or you know what? We were OG remote, and we're just gonna stay that way. Give us the rundown of those early days.
Sure. So I was not here for the very earliest of days, but I can tell you the story that got us here. So it turns out that our 2 co-founders, one decided to move from Boulder, Colorado, and one had never worked remotely before. So they kind of had a moment in time where it was, are we going to stay remote? Or are we going to stay and require people? Or are we going to go remote? How is this going to work? So they ended up deciding we're going to try this remote thing and built some really strong cultural practices around that. That said, prior to the pandemic, we did have a headquarters because there were teams that would come in. Not everyone reported there, but we did also have creative practices to make sure this hybrid, but primarily remote first culture that had been built would have strong foundations of a culture, would have good practices that were inclusive and kind of shifted power dynamics that can get lost in a hybrid environment as well. And since the pandemic, we've actually disbanded. We've decided not to renew that lease in Boulder, and we're fully distributed. So now our journey looks a little more like ad hoc meetings, leveraging co-working spaces, renting conference rooms. I have a team that works really hard on that for everyone, that we can kind of ad hoc. If you have a group of people that are primarily concentrated on the East Coast that need to get together, you get together. So we've kind of shifted that budget from having one HQ to really moving to our travel and budget so that way teams can get together on an ad hoc needed basis. Also leveraging strong practices because we're not getting together. Most of our employees don't have to travel very often because we just have strong remote practices for collaboration.
Really cool. Okay, so you went there, right? We have a lot of remote working nerds that listen to our podcast,
Yes.
but we want to be invitational to the people that are new to some of these ideas, right?
Sure.
And we want to maybe pull that apart a little bit. When you say hybrid and primarily remote first, right? You kind of talked a little bit about what that meant. So give us that like before and after. You disbanded, right? And so there was one version that was then, right? And then there's another version that's now. How would you say there are things that are the same and things that are different, or things that will always be true of TeamSnap and how you operate? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So always, let me start with the always. Always remote first. That's not going to change. That is embedded in who we are. It's embedded in our practices. So what has changed is that hybrid approach, which is we used to have a headquarters, so it was more common in that hybrid role where people would fly in, or if teams are meeting, where you might be sitting in a meeting where you have 5 people that are in an office and then 3 are dialing in. That's a very different dynamic in terms of communicating, right? So we had some practices in place. I went to HQ. I actually was remote. So the headquarters was in Denver, or in Boulder, Colorado. I am in Southern California. So there were times when I would fly in, a bunch of us would be meeting, everyone was in person. But say we had a call right after that where 3 people were dialing in and 5 of us were in the office, we all disbanded to our desks. Why? Because it's really hard to practice turn taking in the room when several people are dialing in and everyone gets that energy that's being felt in the room. So it kind of leveled the playing field in terms of communication. That was a common practice that we don't really do as much now, because most of the time, if we are going to be meeting in person, we're bringing all the stakeholders into the room, and we do it on an ad hoc basis.
Okay. Thank you for going deep there. I love that you gave us the before and after of those like there were hybrid meetings and now there really isn't, right? And even when you say hybrid meeting, that was not actually a hybrid meeting. You guys actually like went remote inside of the office, right? to say that like there is not going to be a one kind of experience versus another kind of experience of this meeting. We're going to have one experience of this meeting, and it's going to be, I've heard people say when one is remote, all is remote, or one person, one device, that kind of vibe.
Yes. And I mean, there were occasions, don't get me wrong, where like somebody got sick and everyone was in the room. And so they didn't come into the meeting, but they would be at home doing it. That was helpful. But for the most part, that was our general practice. Got
you. Okay. When you say remote first is the always piece, right? You said that is always going to be embedded in the way you all are working. When you say, like, what are some of those other kind of like bullet points that are a part of that, like what's embedded in, TeamSnap's remote first strategy?
Yeah, hiring. So we do have some state limitations at the moment, but that is just more because we're building out our HR team and there's just some paperwork that needs to be filed, the logistics. It's a big burden on a small or mid-sized HR team at a small to mid-sized company to hire in 37 to 50 states. There is a time zone difference issue that can be challenging. From Hawaii to the East Coast is 6 hours. That can be really challenging, especially for companies that aren't used to having maybe like 18 or 12 or 24-hour operations.
I've been there leading a team from Seattle to Melbourne. Yes, I know that feel.
It's the worst, but it's also the best. So for example, I am an early bird. So I'm on the West Coast. Much of my team is on the East Coast. I love working at 5 o'clock in the morning. I dig it because by 4 o'clock, my kids need me. So I am able to do that. And we have other employees who are in that boat as well. So there is some advantage to having some spread, but too much when you're not being intentional and deliberate can be really hard. So if you're in a period of high growth, that is a tough time to implement new change management, right? And new change practices and policies. So when you're growing or going through periods of rapid change, not the time to start spreading the time zone. So I think that would be one, is that we have put some constraints on it. But as far as hiring, remote. We will always hire people. We post remote. Our onboarding is remote. We do have a small pocket where I would call orientation, right? Which is those first few days, not onboarding, which is 30, 60, 90 days. But there are some teams, especially like our sales team, that they huddle up or they try to hire regionally because it's just easier, because those groups, especially for more junior level roles that are newer, maybe you've never had a corporate job before and you have no idea what it means to operate within the walls. It's different than working flipping burgers at In-N-Out. The expectations are so you can learn.
Well, hold on just a second. They're going to be mad at you. It's Shake Shack, East Coast, right?
Okay.
And not In-N-Out.
What a burger.
Okay. All
I'm
right.
coasting myself here, right? Like I'm going on the left coast instead of the right. Shit, whatever it is, many new employees who might be earlier in their careers, 22, 23, 24, there's just some nuances learned. So sometimes we'll hire regionally just to allow for more in-person connection when it comes to that specifically orientation and just those check-ins the first 12 to 18 months in the career.
I love that idea that there's onboarding to the virtual workplace, right? And then there is orientation to the in-person, like relationship-based component to working at TeamSnap. I love that idea.
Yeah, and just learning, right? Just that orientation is like, how do I do my I-9, which is, that paperwork we all have to fill out, and how do I get those things? Just that's overwhelming, and I think people forget that sometimes. I tell people no matter where they are in their career, the first 60 to 90 days of a job, it's just knowledge drinking from a fire hose. It's exhausting. Your brain fatigues. So it's important to think about how we do that onboarding and that orientation piece effectively. And we have found that with more junior employees who are brand new to the corporate workforce, a little bit more in person, again, hiring remotely, most of the time working from home, but having the option to be in person kind of allows for a safer place to ask those questions.
Okay, take us back to that moment of decision around disbanding the in-person like office piece that had been in Colorado, right? You mentioned this phrase that we're going to shift the budget, right? I've seen talk out there on the interwebs of people saying remote is a way to save money, right? And now you're saying we're not just going to slash that budget, we are going to shift it. Give us some color on that decision-making process.
Sure. So I don't think that it's a net savings where it's like, yes, you go down to $0. That's all savings. I think pragmatically, and this is the HR person in me talking, people are freaking complicated. Communication is hard, right? Like, and being remote is good, but it takes so much effort. There are times when a business or decision making needs to be happening, and there needs to be everyone working on the same time zone. And to say that you're never going to need to meet in person, that works for some companies. For our culture, it's not 100% true. Just the way we've operated and the way some of our leaders maybe haven't been, and I mean like managers and above, remote's newer to them. So we shifted that budget. Maybe it wasn't the whole budget of a lease and everything we needed, but some of it had to go over because realistically, the way we operate culturally, we do recognize that there are still people learning remote, right? This is still newer for much of the workforce. Very few people. I can say I've worked remote for almost 15 years. That is rare. And it takes a different level of rigor and discipline that not all people have learned that skill. So the shift came from supporting that transition.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just hope more people see the light on that. Okay. So you mentioned like the trade-offs and, like potential training opportunities that exist around like being able to and you just described the idea that there's maybe some like self-management involved in being successful working remotely. How do you build up those skills in the TeamSnap team to be able to, are we the snappers? What's our the team snappers? Okay. All right. So how do the team snappers, how do they become really strong remote workers?
Okay, so I am going to start before they even get through the door, and that starts with strong recruiting practices. So when I got to TeamSnap, one of the things I did, I'd worked remotely. So I'd worked remotely as a consultant, but also was in-house. So I saw both sides of it. I knew that recruiting a profile was really important. I got here. I spent my first 30 to 60 days, and I encourage everyone who's in our HR team that's going to be involved in any sort of recruiting to do the same. Study the company. Understand what makes someone successful. Because remote cultures, I love how everyone like lumps them together. They're different. Every company is different. They have a different thumbprint. They have different cadence. They have different ticks, right? And so we need to understand who's going to thrive there and recruit against it. So for us, we look at proactive communicators. I think that's going to be no matter where you are remotely. I would hedge my bets that that's the case. So somebody who's not afraid to say, oh, I don't know the answer to this, but I'm just going to proactively Slack somebody and say, can I get 10 minutes with you to understand this? So looking at proactive communicators. I think innovative communicators, people who can think through, okay, does this, I wish I had the mug, but this meeting could have been an email, right? So are there people who are thinking about, can I use a Loom to send a pre-read, right, or a preview of what the meeting is about? So we screen against those things really closely before they get in the door. Then and that's not to say, and just to be clear, that doesn't mean you have to have worked remotely. We're not screening for that. It's do you have the competencies and the skills that will help you thrive in a remote environment? Because there are plenty of people who've never worked remotely who do great. So we screen for competencies and skills. Then when they get here, we do talk about this often. I frequently coach on what I call the rule of three in remote work. So this was something I came up, I was training on Radical Candor, which is an incredible book, but how do you translate that to remote work, right? Because let's be clear, it is very easy to hide behind a screen. It is easy to jam out words in Slack when you feel like you're talking to a machine and not a person, and there's regrets, right? It's not just regrets, it's regrets, which are the big ones because you got it all wrong. Exactly. So the rule of three that we train a lot on here is, say you, Tyler, send me an email, and then I send you an email back, and then you're going to jam, that hard typing, right? The clickety clack, and you're slamming it down. Stop. If you are going back a third time, the medium's not working. Whether it's Slack, whether it's email, or if we're in person on a Zoom and it's getting animated and we've exchanged 3 times, time out, change your medium, step away. Ask to jump on a Zoom if you're using async communication so you can remember the humanity. So there are things like that we put into training. We also spend a lot of time talking to managers about conflict, because I think that's the hardest thing to do remotely, is have healthy conflict. There's some interesting studies behind it. I think one, are people conflict avoidant? It's very easy to hide when you're not in person if you're conflict avoidant, because you can't see if I'm squeezing my hands, right? Or if my body language is changing, because all you see is my shoulders up. So I might see someone's face getting red. So excavating healthy conflict is important. I think the other thing is turn taking. So there's been some great research out of Stanford about how you turn take in remote communication. It's different. We talk a little bit about that. And we build that into our manager training. How do you excavate ideas, not just conflict? How do you mine for conflict, but how do you pull ideas? How do you ask people to participate actively? So there's training in that regard too, because some people are on a different place in their learning curve.
Well, shout out to Kim Scott. Thank you for encouraging us to bring radical candor into our working relationships and any kind of relationship. But looking for, what is that thumbprint of the company, right? Identifying proactive communicators, innovative communicators. In fact, listener, you're doing it right now. You are listening to us asynchronously. Well done. You can do snaps to the team snappers that already do that, and snaps to you, listener, for practicing that yourself in the way that you're receiving this communication. And maybe tell me some more about this excavating for ideas that you've taught managers. I think that's one of the parts of that's out there right now in the remote space that if you're paying attention to the headlines, right? Facebook is telling all of the middle managers to go get a job. How do we help those managers bring value to the company?
Yeah. So I think it's just about it's similar skills that you would use in person. Honestly, it's just creating more space for them. So I think the group that gets hurt the most with remote work are introverts. Because if you are already somebody who is less inclined, the way we're operating, and I'm going to be really clear, there's also a huge opportunity for introverts. So I'm going to get there in a second. So that's your preview. Mm-hmm. In a natural cadence of just have a meeting, report out, ask for feedback, they're not going to step up, especially in remote work. It is too scary. So it's creating safe space. Now, where is there the opportunity? And this leads to inclusion as well. Great, use tools, put together whiteboards, take polls, use data, right? I always talk about one of our guiding principles is feedback is the fuel that drives excellence. So use technology to excavate those ideas, breakout rooms. If you're in Zoom, somebody's not going to talk in a 20-person meeting. Put them in a group of 3, ask for a report out. So those are the things that we'll send a question like, all right, go and put together, what is your ideas? What are 3 creative ideas you have on solving this problem we're tackling right now? Put them in small groups, have that group report out, because then you can pull those ideas and that information from people who might be really apprehensive to participate.
Interesting to like put layers inside of the meeting, and that like
Yes.
maybe it's not only the screen to screen, or if it's not necessarily face to face, it's it's screen to screen very often here in these remote companies, but like if it's gonna be screen based, like take advantage of that and put a document involved, have a whiteboard, right? Use the poll, like display the data, right? Like have we often put a whiteboard inside of those conference rooms, well, then use the whiteboard that's right in front of our face, right? I think that's an interesting invitation.
But think about it. If you're in person, this is where I talk about the advantage for those introverts. If you have a group of introverts, great ideas, great thinkers, just maybe not the person. If you're in a room, they're not going to jump up with a marker in front of everyone and like write on the board, but they will in the comfort of their desk. Right. It is easy to write with their Apple Pen or to, clickety clack, type it in. And so
Mhm.
there's a huge opportunity there with remote work that does bring different people to the table, but that requires a lot more planning with meetings. It requires a lot more intentionality. And then most likely, because many companies don't have the advantage of, 12, 13 years remote, training, taking time to train and educate managers on how to do those things.
Imagine that we need to learn how to do things.
What?
Guilty. In a previous career, I was a technology-oriented teacher, and obviously now I'm a teaching-oriented technologist, and I think that's so awesome to hear you rhyming with my experiences of leading remote teams as well. Okay, so I, I'm talking to TeamSnap, and I'm talking to you, Sheila. I am also like a team sports nerd, in the same way that you all are. And so I wanted to invite you to talk about the ways and things that you've brought your experiences as an athlete and as a sports fan into your working professional life. Because I'm a big believer in the idea of identity stacks, right? Where like for me, I am a spouse, I am a parent, I am a youth sports coach. And my success as a professional oftentimes finds its roots in those things that I am before I'm a worker. So tell us
Yes.
more about that for you all.
Have you been in my head when I'm swimming laps in the morning? Okay. Because literally, I keep thinking about this. So I'm actually also a coach. I'm an assistant coach for a high school girls cross country team, which I love. But do you know how much of the overlap between, I'm also a parent of 3 teenage boys, so 16, 16, 18. So we're like in the launching phase, which is
Mm.
awesome and awful at the same time, all balled into one. Yeah, you're just like, all you do is you spend 18 years hoping they're going to be good people, and now we're going to see. But there is this intense overlap. I keep thinking about how I want to write this blog about what it's like to be like coaching athletes, being an athlete, and then coaching managers and leaders and executives, because that's so much of my role as an HR executive. The lessons are all the same. They are. So an example I was thinking about the other day, and we actually have this on TeamSnaps. I wrote a blog post about it. Was so my son was doing a 20-mile race, and we knew by mile 3 he was injured. But he's like, I'm not going to finish this in time. His goal was to win it, but he's like, I think I can finish. And I remember thinking, okay. And I turned to him because I was on the course with him, on the course coaching with your own pubescent child, so lots of hormones. I didn't know how this was going to play out. Like, this could be ugly. We may never speak until he's 30, or this is going to be a bonding experience. There's no in between. So I remember looking at him. I said, okay, dude, like 1 mile at a time. That's it. We're going to check in every mile, and I'm going to go yay or nay. And that's all we're focusing on. And so for 17 miles, we just focused on 1 mile. Well, here I am, 5 years later, swimming laps because I hate it and I'm injured. I'm a runner. And I'm using the same thing. I'm like, 4 more laps and then we check in. 4 more laps, we check in. When my team, see, it connects to work. when my team is going through change and we had just done an acquisition and our to-do list was this long, right? I'm thinking, I remember huddling up the team and I'm like, too much. We're all overwhelmed on the big picture. So we're going to make a list of all the things that are spinning out in our head in live time. So remote work, collaboration, live doc, share screen, everyone put it down. And then we are going to focus on what we need to do for the next 10 days. And everything else goes out of our minds, right? 1 mile at a time, and then we check in. So those lessons all overlap. The reason it's been in my head is I'm like, I should just write a blog or do like a vlog or something on how these lessons overlap, because there's so much connection.
Yeah, I think there's so much for those domains to learn from one another. And
Yes.
and I know for myself, right, I am involved with an American football team
Mm-hmm.
here in my hometown, and I do all the things that are not football. I'm the like the guy that leads the volunteers, that does video and stats and social media and all that sort of stuff.
So are you
And I
using TeamSnap though?
we have used competitor products, unfortunately, but I'm definitely a fan of what you all are doing in the space of thinking about how we can apply those learnings, right? To say, okay, we want to teach one another how to work hard and care about something beyond ourselves, right? I mean, that's like the most fundamental part about being in a team, right? Is to say, what is the accountability for us to be able to say, you're going to do this and I'm going to do that, right? And then also, how do we, express our care and concern for one another, right? And it's that work hard, love teammates kind of mottos that teams the world over have made use of to become better than they were apart, right, together.
Yes.
And I guess I'm curious to learn if there's any of those sorts of mottos in the TeamSnap community of like, okay, we're all sporty people because we've all chosen to join TeamSnap. Is there anything like that you guys have hung your hat on to say this is us?
Yeah, so I will say, first and foremost, we actually don't hire all sporty people. They're sports inclined, usually, but not always.
Right.
We have plenty of
Yeah.
people who are like, I don't know, I don't understand. I couldn't tell you a touchdown from a home run. I just know that I'm a really good software coder. I'm a developer, and I'm going to make kick butt code for you.
It
Okay?
takes all kinds. It takes all kinds. It takes all
100%.
kinds. Yeah.
That said, our values, we worked really hard, and I actually think this is an important lesson for remote work. We worked so hard and diligently to identify what, there's a gentleman named Patrick Lencioni, and he does this incredible work, right? Big fan. Like, I probably would some people would melt down if they walked into Tom Cruise. If I saw him in person, I'd probably harass him. Can you talk? Can I have 5 minutes of your time? But he did this work on core values. And core values, most companies have like 6, 7 of them. We did at one point. Core value, that's not how he defines them. Core values are who you are, who you've always been, and what will never change. That is the that is the hook we hang our hats on here at TeamSnap. And that allows us to have this unified vision. That allows us, so one team. We are always talking about being part of one team. You see that all the time. We hire for people who operate that way. Like when fit hits the shan, who's going to lean in and be like, not my responsibility, but you know what? You are overwhelmed. I'm all in. You tell me what I need to do. That's what we look for. And that doesn't matter if you're in person or remote. I actually think remotely you have more opportunity because you're able to really dive into like, oh, you know what? It's only 3:00 my time. You go feed your kids. I've got this. We talk about authenticity. Candidly, I'm an openly gay female tech executive. There are not a lot of me floating around in the industry, and I swore I wouldn't work somewhere where I couldn't show up and be my best self. The way authenticity also shows up for us, and this is important for our remote work, is that we believe every child should have access to sports because we think sports do great. The studies show it helps with mental health. It helps with confidence. 93% of female leaders all were in youth sports at some point, right? This is so important. And after the pandemic, youth sports dropped off. We have a committed community impact team. When we bring our people in person for H2 this year, when our teams are getting together in person, we're asking them, find a community impact event. Go to Denver, work with the Special Olympics, who we're a partner with, find an event, volunteer for a day together, and then work on your business. So that also allows us to kind of have this unified vision. And then elevating the game. We want to make sports better for our kids, and we want to make our company better. We are working on that diligently every day. So I know it sounds hokey and like cliche, like our values are what we hang our hat. They are, and it's more than I've ever seen at any company, or I wouldn't be sitting here. And I know for sure the rest of our executive team wouldn't be either.
Well, Sheila, I appreciate you coming here today and sharing your experience and TeamSnap's experience of working remotely. I appreciate the opportunity to be inviting all of who you are to this moment in time. And whenever you happen to be listening to this, there are others like you. There's others that are not like you that are all doing similar things. And just because you haven't done it yet doesn't mean you can't. So thank you so much, Sheila, for championing the cause of youth sports generally, and also TeamSnap's role in helping that become excellent and elevating the game. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me today and listening to our TeamSnap story. We're really excited about it. So thank you, Tyler.